To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. I was planning to record this podcast tomorrow morning. I was planning to get up bright and early on Sunday morning and record the pod to be released at a more suitable hour. That was my plan. Busy day coming up tomorrow. And I thought I'll get up nice and early when I've calmed down a little bit, and I'll record this podcast and distribute it to you guys so that you can take it in whilst I then go off and go on about my day. And then I got home from Emirates Stadium. I sat down, I had my dinner, I watched the rest of the Manchester City West Ham game. Erling Haaland looks bloody phenomenal, by the way, doesn't he? That's what we're up against, by the way. So when people sit there and say Arsenal are definitely going to win the league, this is their year, and I'm sitting there saying, just wind it in a little bit. Let's see what happens. We're contenders for sure, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of an effort. I decided that I was going to not get involved on the whole Twitter thing tonight, that I wasn't going to be scrolling through, that I wasn't going to be reading stuff, that I wasn't going to continue to wind myself up about a situation that, quite frankly, I'm very angry about. That's what I said on the Patreon pod after the game. I wasn't frustrated or disappointed. I didn't feel let down by the performance or anything like that. We'll come on to talk about elements of the performance that weren't quite at the level that we've come to expect. And I think there are things that we can look at that we needed to do better ourselves. I think there are things that we can point out as potential shortcomings in our game today. I've got some concerns that I think are probably going to carry over as well into the coming weeks and months. And maybe they're things that might even crop up throughout the season that we need to find solutions to and need to make adjustments maybe to deal with. But as I say, I wasn't planning on getting involved in all this tonight. And then, just out of habit, because I don't know about you guys, but I certainly do it out of habit, I picked up my phone just after Manchester City had scored the third, and I started scrolling. And I got to a clip of Fabian Hurzeler talking about the Declan Rice red card. And it made my blood boil. I'll tell you why it made my blood boil. We're going to hear from Fabian Hurzeler in a minute. So I'm going to play you the clip to give you the context so you understand exactly why I'm angry. After the game today, when we went into the radio room to interview the two respective coaches, Fabian Hurzeler came in first. And he came in, and I'd pointed out during the game, and I think I tweeted about it as well during the game, that he was really animated on the sidelines. And obviously, when an opposition manager is like that against your team in your stadium, as a fan, because if I take my radio hat off for a minute, as a fan, it was irritating me throughout the game. He was complaining, so much so that Fabian Hurzeler went into the book today. But when he walked into that radio room, putting the referee's decision aside, which I'm going to come on to, believe me, I'm going to have a right old rant about that. But putting the referee's decision to one side for a second, when Fabian Hurzeler came into that room and he stood there and he spoke of his disappointment at the fact that Brighton and Hove Albion, yes, Brighton and Hove Albion, had come to the Emirates and not taken all 3 points, I was taken aback. I was really impressed with him. And I thought, this guy at such a young age is so driven, so ambitious. I stood there while he was being interviewed by those around me thinking, he's going right to the very top, this man. I was so impressed. And when he walked out of the room, I turned to one of my colleagues and I said, wow, He's impressive, isn't he? Really, really impressive. And then I heard what he said in the press conference. I wasn't in his press conference. I was only in the radio interview. I heard what he said in his press conference, and I thought to myself, stop. Hold on a minute. I get why you're saying it, but there's a lot wrong with what you're saying. Let's have a listen to what Fabian Hurzeler said. Let's have a listen to what it was in particular that I took issue with. This is just a clip from the press conference. Obviously, there was a much longer conversation around it, but just have a listen to this. When he was asked about the Declan Rice red card, this is what he said.
He shoots the ball away. It's wasting time. So I think there are no two opinions. You can't compare, I think, these two situations. So the first with Joel is clear, like it's a free kick, so it's a static situation, and the other is much more like a dynamic situation and was not even clear out. So he tried to keep the ball in the game. So please never compare like these situations, because in football, two situations never are the same. So we can't compare these two situations.
Clear red card, he says. Rice was wasting time. He shoots the ball away. What? He literally flicked it with the outside of his right boot. And I was listening to TalkSport just now, and my good friend Rory Jennings, I thought, summed it up brilliantly when he said that the ball didn't even roll once in full. The ball didn't even orbit once. But apparently Declan Rice has shot the ball away. He's blasted it away. And of course, this was completely different to Joao Pedro's one in the first half, where he literally punted the ball half the length of the pitch. Why? Because one is a static situation and one is a dynamic situation. What does that even mean? He says you can never compare two situations. You can compare situations. And the problem that we have in the Premier League right now is that we're getting to a place where everything is being done so literally to the letter of the law. And that is spoiling the game in itself. But if you're going to take that approach, if you're going to do everything to the letter of the law, then you have to, at the absolute minimum, be able to apply consistency in one game, throughout the duration of one game. I understand. I'm not one of those people that takes situations from one game and compares them to situations from another game, because I understand that in different environments, with different players involved, with different officials involved, and all the rest of it, to ask for a blanket level of consistency across the league is a big ask. And I don't think, when so much of it is down to interpretation, that that is even possible. You want to get as close to that as you possibly can. But to say that you're definitely going to achieve consistency across all the 10 Premier League games in a weekend, that's, to me, unrealistic. The goal and the aim has to be as close to that point as possible. But I'm realistic enough to know that's not going to be the case. What I always take issue with, though, and what I really struggle to get my head around, is when officials can't apply consistency even within the limited period of a 90-minute game, when the same players are involved, when the same context is applied. That's where I get really, really frustrated. That's where I get really, really frustrated. The Joao Pedro one was somebody kicking the ball away. What Declan Rice did, flicking it away, it's like when someone goes to take a free kick and someone stands on top of the ball to stop them taking it quickly. When do players get booked for that? They don't. This was such a pedantic piece of officiating. Everybody in the stadium, everybody in the ground at that point thought that Veltman was going for the kick through Rice. And why hasn't Veltman been even spoken to about that, by the way? The standard of officiating in this league is so bad. It was last season, it was the season before, and we've got a new season, lots of shiny new players, lots of things to be excited about. But guess what? The standard of officiating is still in the bin. No signs of it improving. This is Chris Kavanagh, by the way, that felt that Joe Linton, I said I'm not going to compare games, and I'm not going to do that directly, but Joe Linton clotheslined the goalkeeper last week, and he thought it was fine. So am I surprised when I looked at the name on the team sheet and figured out who the referee was and then went back to figure out what games he'd been involved in recently? No, I'm not surprised in the slightest. There are some referees in this league that just are not good enough. And he is one of them. I'm sorry. And the problem that we have, the biggest problem that we have in the Premier League is when managers do things like this. Now, I'm going to sit here and say that Mikel Arteta has never done this. No, I'm not, because I'd be a liar. I think that if managers got together and really kind of had a constructive discussion about how we can try and help improve things in this league, because at some point or another, every single one of them will be on the receiving end of some really bad officiating. If they all got together and discussed this, the solution needs to be that rather than giving stupid interviews like this, actually you say, look, to the letter of the law, maybe, and we benefited from it today, but I don't want to see players sent off from that or for that. If you say that, Fabian Hurzeler, the Premier League aren't going to step in and say, oh, hold on a minute, you got a point. We're going to take your point away because you don't agree with the decision. That's not going to bloody happen, is it? If we put tribalism to one side for a minute and literally be honest about what we're seeing, then these officials who make these types of mistakes week after week after week throughout the duration of the season and constantly get away with it and get put on another game the following week, they've got somewhere to hide. Why have they got somewhere to hide? Because someone like Fabian Hurzeler has come out and said, no, it's absolutely fine. It's 100% a red card. Rival fans can't put their tribalism to one side and say, hold on a minute, we're worried about the state of our game here. We're all guilty of it, myself included. But maybe that's what needs to happen for these officials to not be able to go and hide behind a 50-50 split on every decision. Nobody in their right mind, nobody that grew up loving football in its purest form wants to see a player sent off for that. I am sorry. I don't care if João Pedro got away with it. The only reason I'm bringing it up and why I'm so annoyed about it is because it just shows an inconsistency within that game. And that's where the real frustration comes from. Don't book João Pedro, don't book Declan Rice. Book João Pedro, then book Declan Rice. No problem. But it's that lack of consistency that really annoys me. And Mikel Arteta was understandably incredibly pissed off about this as well after the game. Here's what he said in the press conference.
Amazed because how inconsistent decisions can be. In the first half, there are 2 incidents, nothing happened. And then in a non-critical area, the ball hits Declan here. He turns around. He doesn't see the play come, he touches the ball. By law, he can make that call. But by law, then he needs to make the next call, which is red card. So we play 10 against 10. So this is what amazes me. It's at this level, it's honestly amazing.
Mikel Arteta, obviously not happy at all, and understandably so. There's a comment in the chat from Oslo Gunnar, and let me know your thoughts on this decision as well. Listen, there are things that I'm going to be critical of Arsenal for based on tonight's performance or today's performance, this morning's performance. Feels so bloody long ago now. We're going to get into all of that stuff. But I wanted to start with this because I feel like I need to get it off my chest. Then I can stop making excuses if that's how you're taking it. And we can talk about the actual rest of the game. But I do think the game was seriously impacted by this. That's why you have to start on it. Oslo Gunnar says, Ref Watch tomorrow will be a laughing stock. The PGMOL will say whatever to deflect off their horrible referees. Exactly. And listen, when I'm like, I've gone after Chris Kavanagh a little bit here, right? Not because I wish bad on Chris Kavanagh, because I don't think he's good enough at his job. Okay, that's my honest opinion on him. My opinion of other referees is quite similar. There are some referees that I think are actually quite good and are among the better ones. And I'm not saying that Chris Kavanagh should be sacked or that people should jump online and personally abuse him or anything like that. But when a player makes a mistake, we will scrutinize the living daylights out of them. When a manager makes a mistake, we criticize them. Mikel Arteta's Arsenal have dropped points, not solely because of this, but partly because of this. Anyone that watched the game could see how this decision altered the pattern of the game. Anyway, Steve also says on this, Harry, Rice was on autopilot when he tapped the ball away. Why? Because he's been trained to do so. Yeah, correct. So have most players in the game. And that's why I think you see players like Bukayo Saka getting really angry and agitated and looking really deflated even post-match by a decision like that, because everybody knows that it's just part and parcel of the game. Declan Rice was on a yellow card because he'd made one foul in the game prior the one foul he'd made in the game prior to the second yellow, he got a yellow card for. So there's nothing wrong with a referee applying a bit of common sense. I'm sure not a Brighton fan in the world would have complained had Chris Kavanagh gone over to Declan Rice and said, "You're on a yellow card, mate. Watch your step." Nobody would have complained. Give the guy a final warning. There are some things that override the final warning. Like had he gone into a challenge really high or whatever, or had it been like the first one that he received the yellow card for, then I'm absolutely fine with him getting no warning, because that's bloody obvious. It's not a referee being pedantic. It's clear. It's clear cut. In this case, though, it's just totally unnecessary from Kavanagh. It's just totally unnecessary. Also, if we're going to apply the letter of the law, let's have it right. They're complaining. What Fabian Hurzeler is suggesting is that Arsenal, and Declan Rice in particular on this occasion, prevented Brighton from taking a quick free kick. Static situation versus dynamic situation, he says. He says that Arsenal were time wasting. He says that Declan Rice was time wasting. That was the intent, apparently. Well, you know that free kick that Veltman tried to take quickly, apparently? He had no intention of taking a quick free kick. He just wanted to highlight the fact that Declan Rice was in front of him. But anyway, that free kick, guess what? It would have been illegal because the ball was rolling. If we're applying things to the letter of the law, then the ball was rolling, so the free kick's illegal anyway. Therefore, it's totally irrelevant what Declan Rice has done. It is a joke of a decision. It is an embarrassment of a decision. And we're now going to be without Declan Rice for the North London derby. Okay, we went down to 10 men today, and I think it impacted the pattern of the game and it made us weaker. No question about that. But to have him missing for the North London derby because of that is really difficult to swallow and really, really difficult to take. Let's take a few more of your questions and comments on this, and then we'll move on. Sports Genius says, Harry, is the Prem trying to be the best league in the world or not? Why are the referees so bad? This matters because we go to the derby without Rice. Completely agree. Himalaya Sharma says the ball was already in motion, so technically the free kick was already taken and therefore no delay in the restart. Can we appeal the decision so that Rice can play against Spurs? I'm pretty sure that you can't appeal a second yellow card. And I think that if you do appeal, I don't think you can appeal in this situation. But if you did appeal, there's always a chance that you lose the appeal and you get another game added on top. And if that was a gamble that we had the sort of opportunity to take, I don't know if we would, because then that would mean if we lost the appeal, Declan Rice would be missing for the Manchester City game as well, which I'd argue is even worse. So yeah, no appeal. That's not available to us. I don't think we'd get anywhere with it anyway, because they would just point to that law, wouldn't they? And they'd say, letter of the law. That's what we're getting at the moment. But anyway, enough about that. I don't want to talk about it again. I'm really frustrated about it, really angry. Let's move on. Let's talk about the game itself and how that played out. I thought we started the game really brightly. Leandro Trossard came into the starting 11 and replaced Gabriel Martinelli. I think that's a change that all of us expected to see, given that Trossard had come off the bench at Villa Park and played a massive role again, scoring Arsenal's first and ultimately sending the Gunners on their way to picking up their first away victory of the season. In the opening stages, I thought Bukayo Saka was just incredible. He had Hinchelwood on toast, as the saying goes. He was tormenting him. I said to a colleague of mine at halftime, I reckon Hinchelwood is going to wake up in the night in cold sweats and he's going to see Bukayo Saka in his nightmares because he was that good against him. Some people are mentioning in the chat box the handball appeal against Luis dunk, was it? It was Ben White's effort. It looked like it was heading towards the goal. Really difficult for me to tell from my angle because I was sitting kind of side on. Look, but that's that kind of the fact that I've only brought that up now because you guys have brought it up in the chat box. That kind of it reinforces the point that I was making earlier that common sense can be applied. Right? Dunk's hand is down. It ain't outstretched. It isn't an issue for me. At the time, I didn't appeal for it. When I saw the replay on the monitor in front of me, I didn't really appeal for it. I was fine with that just being allowed to go because I think all of us understand, those of us that have grown up watching this sport, that love this sport, that there are instances in football where you need to apply common sense as a referee. And I thought that common sense was applied, probably not by Chris Kavanagh, because judging by the game he had today, I'd be surprised if he even saw it. But the VAR, obviously, who did take a look at that, applied some common sense, and I'm absolutely fine with that. No complaints around that for me whatsoever. In the first half, I thought we were good at the start, and then I thought we had a period towards the end of the half where we started to wrestle back control again. But in between that, Brighton started to grow into the game. They started to settle into the game. They were knocking the ball around quite well. I thought their midfield was a bit more, to use a hurzeler word, dynamic than ours. I thought that they got around the pitch a little bit better. And although they lost James Milner early on, which would have been seen as a blow, I'm sure, at the time, they ended up, as a result, having a bit more legs in the middle of the park. And I thought they did really, really well. And I kept watching really closely, in particular, one area of the pitch. And it was on the right-hand side where Bukayo Saka in that wide channel was having lots and lots of joy against Jack Hinshelwood. But inside, in that half space where Martin Odegaard likes to operate, I thought Brighton did a wonderful job of overloading and making sure that Martin Odegaard didn't have the space that he normally does, didn't have the freedom to drift into other areas without being tracked. And as a result of that, they've really shut off the effect of Martin Odegaard. Now, he took a kick in the first half where the player, and I can't remember if it was Baleba or Minte, but whoever it was, clears the ball, but then kicks through Martin Odegaard. And again, for me, if you want to apply the letter of the law, you could say that that was reckless and it was right under the referee's nose. The fact that he got the ball doesn't mean that it's not reckless and endangering an opponent. He kicks Martin Odegaard so high up the leg. You can make that case. But guess what? I'm not a pedantic Premier League referee. So I'm just going to put it down to an accident that happened. But I do think that it did impact Martin Odegaard. And I think going forward in the game, he was a shadow of his usual self as a result of carrying that knock. We get to just before half-time, around about 7 minutes before half-time, and Arsenal break the deadlock. And it was brilliant play from Bukayo Saka. Just uses his strength, which often goes under the radar because of his size, I guess. And he just sort of moves Lewis Dunk out of the way and then manages to play a ball through for Kai Havertz to run onto. And the finish was sublime from Havertz. I thought Havertz had a really, really excellent game today. Again, I know people will probably point to the chance that he should have tucked away in that second period. I think theoretically, like if I'm breaking it down, he keeps it low. He puts it back across the goal. He kind of does everything that the textbook would tell you to do in that situation as a striker. It's a really good save from Verbruggen. Some would argue that a more clinical striker buries that. I get it, but I just think it's really harsh to kind of dwell on that moment when Kai Havertz's overall game today was so good. He also put another chance on the plate for Bukayo Saka that he couldn't convert. And I don't think people are saying the same thing about him. Another inconsistency. It's been an afternoon of inconsistencies. Anyway, but that red card, which I'm not going to talk about again in any detail or anything, really did change the game. And the reason it was such a big shame was because I've said for a while in pre-season, and obviously it was towards the back end of pre-season because of his late return. But in the first couple of weeks, I felt that Declan Rice, fitness-wise, hasn't been quite at it. I don't think he was at 100% today, Declan Rice, but I certainly thought he was closer to his usual level today than he has been in the first couple of games of the season. So it felt like he was finally getting back into the flow of things, and then he's hit with that. And now we've got an international break, but not just an international break, a suspension that Declan Rice has to serve, which could hinder his recovery back towards full condition. But yeah, anyway, the red card totally changes the game for me. Then we're pinned back. We're trying to play with a kind of mid block. We left some spaces in behind. Unfortunately, we didn't marshal those spaces well enough, and Brighton were able to find an equaliser less than 10 minutes after we went down to 10 men through Joao Pedro. It was an easy pass from Dunk through the middle of our defence, and we should never have allowed the two players that ran through to do so with such ease. I was really, really disappointed in the defending. A lot of people have pointed to Gabriel and said that when he come across, maybe he should have done more. I feel like for Gabriel, it's kind of an awkward situation, and I'll explain a little bit about why in a minute. What I want to do is just bring the goal up and then pause it on a couple of bits so I can kind of explain what I mean by that. I'm not totally defending him, by the way. I do think that, you know, if it was the other way around, if it was William Saliba there, I think we probably get a different outcome. I really do believe that. But I think there's a reason why he couldn't make the challenge that people are saying he should have been making. I think Thomas Partey's role in this has gone under the radar as well, because he doesn't track the run of Joao Pedro. And by not tracking the run, he's not there to get to the rebound first. He's not there to even put Joao Pedro under any pressure when he eventually slots the ball into the back of the net. So really, really disappointing from Thomas Partey there. And on him, while we're on the subject, I keep saying that he looks off it. And again, today he looked off it. He's just not mobile enough anymore. He's not the Thomas Partey of 2-3 seasons ago. Maybe he's still good enough to do a job in a lot of games, but against good sides, and Brighton are absolutely a good side, his lack of mobility right now is causing us a problem. It's costing us. And we now have to go to Spurs with him in the team. We would have had to go to Spurs with him in the team anyway, probably because of Merino's injury. But we now have to go to Spurs with Partey in the team and no Declan Rice to give us those extra legs in the midfield. And I'm worried about that. But anyway, let me just take you back to the goal. So here we go. Hold on a second. I'm going to share my screen with you guys just a moment. Let me just make this full screen actually so that I can show you nice and clearly what I'm talking about. Stop sharing screen on that. Let's share screen again, and let's share it with this one. Is that what I want to do? I think so. There we go. Okay, so have a look at this now, okay? So the ball gets played, and this is the original run through on goal. And you can see that William Saliba and Gabriel have got a little bit confused by the crossover of runs from the two Brighton forward players in this situation. Now, look at Gabriel. He's come across. And the reason I'm telling you that this is a bit difficult for Gabriel is for one simple reason. I just got to take this on, but I can't play it on screen. Otherwise, I get done on a copyright strike. Happened to me a few weeks ago when I was showing you guys some clips. And I was like, nah, it's all good. But it's only a few seconds. And then I ended up getting copyright strike. Basically, this is the moment, I think, where people are saying, well, why didn't Gabriel get rid of it? Why didn't Gabriel make that sliding challenge? And I think this comes down to him just feeling a little bit uncomfortable about going into that challenge, A, as the last man, B, because of the pace that the forward's traveling at. But I think above all of those things, it's about the fact that it's on his wrong side. If this was on the other side of Gabriel, if he was approaching this with his stronger left foot, I think he slides in, he swipes the ball away from the forward, and he takes everything with him. And equally, I think if it was William Saliba, he might be a little bit reluctant to make this challenge too, because he would be, if he was on his wrong side, I'm saying. In this instance, if you swapped Gabriel and Saliba here, okay, so if you moved Gabriel and put him there and put Saliba there, and it was Saliba coming from that angle on his stronger right side, I think Saliba makes the challenge. So when people are saying it's a challenge that Saliba might make, I think that's kind of what they're referring to. I don't think it's wildly bad from Gabriel that he hasn't been able to deal with this situation. I think what's poor and what's even less excusable is the situation in behind here where Thomas Partey's completely switched off. Joao Pedro has gone, and Joao Pedro ends up putting the ball in the back of the net. So, yeah, maybe Gabriel should have done better. Maybe he could have done more. But I believe the reason that he was hesitant in diving in there and trying to take it all was because he was on his wrong side. And that can be problematic for a defender when going at that speed, especially, particularly when you're the last man. You know that if you get it wrong, you're gone. And you're putting your team in a really bad situation. So, hey, it is what it is. Okay, Couple of other bits I wanted to talk about. The missed chances. I talked about the Havertz one. We talked about the Saka one as well. Briefly, it was again some good work from Havertz. We went really kind of direct at that point, and the ball was cut back towards Bukayo Saka on the stretch. He just couldn't convert. I don't think he got much purchase on the ball. Odegaard should have put one away in the first half, by the way, when there was a great cross. I think it might have been from Trossard. They came in nice and early and found him inside the penalty area. He went with his weaker foot and he just never made the connection. Brighton missed a chance as well at 1-1. Ayori, I beg your pardon, forcing a save out of David Raya. A good stop from Raya, another one of those reaction saves. But I guess the thing I would question from an Arsenal perspective, and put the refereeing decision aside, we've gone on and on about it so much that I don't want to spend any more time on it. It was a joke of a decision, and that's that. But I do question why we approached the game the way we did after we went down to 10. I understand that Brighton are a really good side. And if you look at the game's statistics, and I know a lot of this sort of built up over the course of that period where we were down to 10 men, but they had 63.7% of the possession, 22 attempts at goal to our 11. They had 32 touches in our box. We only managed 30. So when I think about all of that, I can understand why we were a little bit worried. And obviously watching the game and seeing it unfold in front of me, it was clear that Brighton, after the sending off, were the better team and by quite some distance. So I kind of get why Mikel and his staff might have looked at it and gone, we need to be a bit more pragmatic here. We need to hope that we've got enough threat on the break with a couple of players by going a little bit direct, using Havertz running in those channels, sticking Bukayo Saka up there as well. But the decision that he made to take off Trossard, fine, but then bolster the midfield. He brings on Riccardo Calafiori and he puts him at left back. And I thought, okay, so he's putting him at left back. That means that Jurrien Timber is going to go into the midfield now. But he doesn't. He ends up becoming a part of a back five. And then you had this kind of like non-existent midfield of Odegaard, of Partey, whose legs were completely gone at that point, and Saka. And then you've got Havertz up front. Like, to me, it didn't make an awful lot of sense. I got to be honest with you. It didn't make an awful lot of sense. I'm just looking at it now. Calafiori comes on to replace Trossard on 59. And for a period of time, we're playing with a back five. Then he brings on Zinchenko to replace Timber. And Zinchenko, I think, oh, well, he's going to go into the midfield then. Goes and sits at left back for most of the remainder of the game. And then, the Zinchenko change was the last one. But he also brings on Gabriel Martinelli. And I thought the Martinelli thing was right, but I thought that needed to happen maybe at 1-0. As soon as we went down to 10 men and the game became a little bit stretched and we were struggling for an outlet, I thought it was the right thing to bring Gabriel Martinelli on. Maybe that took a little bit too long. But my confusion is around why we slumped back and went into a back five. The thing is, if you're trying to defend the last 5 minutes of the game and it's all hands on deck and your strikers and your forwards are knackered and dead to the world, and it is literally about battening down the hatches and just making sure that you get through it, then fine. But in this instance, where there was quite a bit of time to go, about half an hour to go into that back five and essentially make our midfield completely redundant, because you had a Martin Odegaard who was walking with one leg in the second half. You had a Thomas Partey who was completely shot fitness-wise. What you did was give up the midfield, which allowed Brighton to get the amount of possession that they did, to dominate the game the way they did, to control the tempo the way they did. So Fabian Hurzeler is really disappointed that they didn't win it, because he could see that too. He could see that Arsenal had kind of gone, maybe we'll take the point here and we'll just get out of here with that. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, is it me? Am I seeing things? Is it meant to be a back five? Or is it that our midfielder is tracking runs and he keeps getting dragged into the back line because of how aggressive Brighton are with their forward runs? Like, that's what was going through my head. But then David Raya would catch a cross and there would be Saka and Havertz breaking away out to the two flanks, and he wouldn't release it early. He'd take his time. there was one towards the end of the game where he caught the ball and he went down on the ground and he just sat on the ground on top of the ball for like 10 seconds. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, don't we want to win this match? After having all those thoughts about the shape that we took up and all the rest of it. And I just thought to myself, maybe we're content with the point, which was a little bit frustrating. I've got to say, I would have rather that we went out and tried to win it. And if we lost it, we lost it, to be honest with you. That's the way I was looking at it at that time. But it just felt like we sacrificed a midfield. And when you sacrifice a midfield, you're kind of offering up possession to the opposition. And ultimately, you know, if they've got more of the ball, they've got a greater chance of scoring. Nobody ever scored without having the ball, did they? So, yeah, it's a hard one to kind of analyze and assess. I haven't watched the game back yet, and I'm sure on Monday's show we'll bring you some more analysis on that and how it all kind of panned out in that last sort of half an hour of the game. But to me, from what I could see, it looked like we went into our shell, that we went into a back five, that we gave up the impetus in midfield. We were already struggling in midfield, but when you took one of the other players out of there as well, because we'd lost Declan Rice and didn't replace him, I thought that the whole thing just looked much, much worse. And it felt like we were playing on a real fragile setting. And I know that people would argue that actually Arsenal managed to create the two best chances in the game post the sending off, and so they were justified in that approach, because but for some better finishing, they would have won the game. But it just felt to me like we kind of handed the impetus to Brighton at that point, and that was my big disappointment with that second period. Outside of the referee and his contribution, I want to focus on what we can do better. I think, you know, you can be angry and you can voice your frustration and concerns about things that are outside of your control. But ultimately, when you do suffer a defeat and you don't play very well, which was the case today, you do need to look within as well. Izualo says, Harry, I understand that you do not concur with my perspective. I don't know what it is yet. However, the primary concern is the cause of Arteta and leadership. In order to secure this league, we require quality players up front. Again, though, mate, like, is that what cost us today? Like, you could argue that had we converted some chances in that second half, we win the game. But the performance wasn't good enough overall. And to play against a very good Brighton side with 10 men for a half because of a really piss poor piece of officiating, that impacts. And you can't overlook and underestimate how much of an impact that has. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's incredibly harsh to go after the quality that we have in attack. I feel like had we not been a day after the transfer window closed, when some people are frustrated by the business we've done, I don't think you'd even be bringing that up. I think that people are bringing it up now because it's the hot topic, because it's all we were discussing yesterday. And then the following day, you see Arsenal maybe not convert their chances. Listen, with the exception of maybe Erling Haaland, and even he misses a few, pretty much every forward in the league in world football will miss chances. Not anybody in world football is going to convert every single chance that comes their way. So I just think that there's a bit of... cross-pollination between what you're saying now and what you were maybe feeling. And I'm guessing that, of course, but maybe what you're feeling with regards to the transfer window as well. Let's see what else we got here. Steve says, I'm aware Havertz should have scored a second, but that boy played a blinding match, in my opinion. He was solo most of the time. Mate, for me, he was Arsenal's man of the match, and by a country mile. Deflected Mind says, it's true though, Harry. Maybe a Tony would have changed the result today. Haaland is scoring hat-tricks, and we lack a half-decent out-and-out striker. How are we supposed to eclipse them to the title? Do you think, honest question, and feel free to respond in the chat, do you think that Ivan Toney brings the ball down that Kai Havertz does, turns the way Kai Havertz does, has the running power to first get in front of his man and then the running power to stay in front of his man and travel all that way into the box before getting the shot off. The beautiful thing about Kai Havertz and the best thing about Kai Havertz is that he can make chances out of nothing. Out of nothing. The guy's all-round game is unbelievable. Is he the most devastating finisher in the country? No, he's not. Nobody's ever claimed he is. Everybody knows what Kai Havertz is. But his all-round centre-forward play is top notch. Top notch since he's come to Arsenal. It's been unbelievable. So I feel uncomfortable with people saying things like, well, Tony would have scored. Tony would never have dropped that deep. Tony would never have brought the ball down that way. Tony would never have had the speed to turn and get away from the man the way that Kai Havertz did. So Tony wouldn't have even got that chance. And I'm really, really confident in saying that. This is the thing. You know, you look at chances and you got to figure out how they come about. If you're talking about somebody else getting to the byline, cutting it back to the penalty spot, and Kai Havertz blazing it over the bar, and then you're saying, well, Tony would have scored that, then I say, okay, fair enough, maybe he would. But when you're talking about self-made opportunities, like what we saw from Kai Havertz with that one particular instance in the second half, which is the one that ultimately he's being criticized for, that's a self-made opportunity. And you know, if you create those opportunities for yourself, then you miss them. Okay, people are going to criticize you, but ultimately that opportunity was of your own making. If you didn't take it, you didn't take it, but it's not the end of the world, because there aren't many players in the world that would have made that into a situation in the first place. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I think it's Saturday night. I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm miserable, but I've got a super busy day tomorrow because we're celebrating my dad's 60th birthday. So going to be barbecuing all day. Got lots of people coming around and having a good old time. So I'm going to be off the grid tomorrow, which is why I thought, after being wound up by Fabian Hurzeler's comments, it's probably best that I do this today, so that it can be released in a timely manner for you guys, rather than trying to do it at some point tomorrow morning when I'm really busy and maybe not quite on the ball. I mean, I'm never on the ball, but you know what I mean. Anyway, thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for joining me. A big thank you to everybody that tuned into the Match Day Reaction Patreon pod as well a little bit earlier on today. I shared my thoughts straight after the final whistle. You guys got to hear from Mikel Arteta too on that episode as well. That was the last one that's available to our free members on Patreon. So from now on, you're going to need to be a paid member on Patreon to be able to access those pods, the Match Day Reaction ones, but also the other bits and pieces that we're dropping as well. And we've dropped a few episodes over the course of the last few weeks. So if you go onto Patreon now and you still just want to try, you can sign up as a free member and you'll get access to the stuff we've already done. There's a Martinelli piece, there's a Timber piece, there's a few Match Day reactions. Check them out, see what you think, and if you like them, please consider flipping your membership over to a paid one where you'll be supporting the podcast and me to bring you more content. I've talked about the importance of that so many times in terms of how it allows me as a freelancer to spend way more time on this pod that I love so much. So yeah, please do check it out. At least have a look, consider it. No obligation whatsoever. There'll be no hard feelings. I'll never turn around and say, oh, well, you didn't sign up. No, I'm so grateful that you guys even watch or listen to this thing and that I'm not talking to myself however many times it is a week nowadays. But yeah, please do check it out. Remember, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, I'd love you to leave a like on the video. If we can aim for 500 likes on the video, that would be amazing. And if you're listening on audio, subscribe and leave us a review. Thank you all so much. I'll see you all on Monday. Until then, take care of yourselves. All the best. Goodbye.